I'm almost caught up with reviews now, and today we're doing Airborne Kingdom, a balanced city builder with a surprisingly decent story and a unique gimmick to differentiate itself from other city builders. Before we get into it, please show the like button some love and subscribe. It means a lot to me, and any feedback helps me create better videos for you guys. Now, let's get into it. For a game originally designed and released on PC, the controls fit remarkably well on a console such as the Switch. Since I only have one minor complaint, I'll get that out of the way first. Building up your city while it is moving is a struggle. Aside from that, everything feels great. The controls are tight and all of the menus perfectly utilize the Joy-Con buttons. There's no struggling in remembering how to access what, which is truly an accomplishment considering how many different building menus, statistic menus, and customization screens there are. The camera rotates flawlessly to always make everything easy to see, but it also feels tight enough to have worked in an action game or a shooter. I wish the distance at which you could interact with objects was a little further, but that's not a complaint, given that it makes sense in the world of the game. 4 out of 5. The reason having a shorter draw distance makes sense is the primary gimmick of Airborne Kingdom. Your city is a flying fortress. In this regard, it harkens back to recent games like Subnautica or older titles like SimCity and even White Knight Chronicles. Granted, that last one might be a reach. It's a fresh take that somehow feels familiar. It works perfectly for storytelling as well, as your city acts as a protagonist through the simple fact that it is mobile. Other mechanics also have unique takes on ones commonly found in these types of games. You're able to build wonders just like SimCity's landmarks, but in order to unlock them, instead of having your city meet certain conditions, your city actually has to explore most of the map and find pieces of the blueprints for those wonders. There's also a level of randomization post-game that adds to the mechanics, but will be covered later in the review. There is also a tech tree which fits right in and adds an extra layer of strategy to the game. A good example of this would be when I had to prioritize researching the final farm upgrade in order to prevent my city from starving when it was over the mountainous zone, where little food can be gathered otherwise. Strategy is woven into the very fabric of the game, in that you're constantly balancing your resources and fuel in order to keep your city flying, your citizens happy, and still be able to help the kingdoms you are trying to ally. If only there were more unique buildings, this would be the most perfect metric in any game I've reviewed so far. As is, it still deserves a solid 4 out of 5. There aren't distinct levels in Airborne Kingdom, but the world is split into 3 unique biomes. The mountainous biome has very few thicket resource clusters which are used as food for your citizens. The wetlands biome, on the other hand, is plentiful in food and water, but lacks one of the other resources, that being clay if I'm not mistaken. Then the starting biome is well balanced in terms of the resources. Visually, the biomes are distinct from each other as well, with the mountains often being covered in fog and the wetlands having beautiful green farmlands, often surrounded by shallow waters. The starting area is a somewhat arid steppe reminiscent of the Australian outback. However, aside from the visual cues and slight differences in resources, there isn't anything unique about these levels. The story and your missions don't change based on the biome to take into account the challenges kingdoms in those biomes would face. The lack of specific resources also doesn't mean those biomes are completely void of those resources, which defeats the purpose of the biome to some extent. As I only beat the campaign once, I may not have experienced a randomized map where one of the biomes actually had none of the resources it should be low in, but even then, there's such poor utilization of the different biomes that it hurts the overall level design to the point of just being adequate. 3 out of 5. I ran into 2 or 3 of the same glitches in my 17-hour playthrough of Airborne Kingdom. None of them were significant and only one was really annoying. When I try to add a second or third level to one of the buildings that can be stacked, it would occasionally be difficult to hover over the building. The cursor would try to force me to build next to the building instead of stack on top of it. Likewise, placing structures was sometimes more difficult than necessary because the structure would snap to the wrong side of the town and refuse to be moved. I would have to close out the build menu and reopen it with my cursor now closer to the other side of town in order for the building to snap into the correct position. Aside from that, I experienced some lag later in the game when my kingdom was built up. This would occur when building a new structure and often when interacting with a new kingdom or settlement, and the text box would not load for a few seconds. Overall, it was noticeable, but such a minor inconvenience that I can't penalize the game much. It ran pretty consistently outside of these issues, and I did not run into any game-breaking issues. 4 out of 5. There is no difficulty setting, but I found the campaign to be well balanced. Given the unique mechanics of Airborne Kingdom, I think the game is slightly on the difficult side, regardless of whether you are a beginner or a hardened gamer. I found myself losing altitude because I ran out of fuel once, and on multiple occasions I lost citizens due to a lack of food. None of this made me restart the game or even lose significant progress, but it was definitely a learning curve to prioritize certain elements of the game in order to succeed at building my kingdom. There is a creative mode which essentially takes out all of those previously mentioned elements and lets you focus solely on designing your kingdom. This can be viewed as an easy mode. Post-game, you also unlock a new game plus, which increases the distance between features in the game and randomizes the map, making it more of a challenging playthrough. Overall, you can't ask for much more variety and challenge from a game. 5 out of 5. Perhaps the reason your kingdom is up in the air is because of how underwhelming the textures on the ground are. Your citizens took one look at that swamp, and just like Professor Farnsworth, they didn't want to live on this planet anymore. Jokes aside, the textures do leave much to be desired. Almost every single object in the game has rough edges that look like they were designed by a high school student taking an architecture class. It feels like playing a computer game on the lowest graphical settings, except that you can't change them to anything else. This holds especially true for all of the man-made structures in the game. The only environmental effects were clouds, and those also looked underwhelming. The only saving grace is the amazingly beautiful, by comparison, water in the shallows biome. I'm not sure if it was a matter of saving time, but if the developers had put anywhere near as much effort into other textures, this game could have been one of the most visually stunning city builders out there. As it stands, I can't give it more than a 2 out of 5. The art style is nice. They went with this isotopic patchwork design to go with the story of trying to weave together a mystical cloth that told the story of the original Airborne Kingdom. It works well with the story, but also makes an otherwise believable world anything but. When you zoom in, you can see your isotopic low-resolution chess pieces of citizens running around your intricately detailed city. It works, but also feels out of place, and for me, it's a miss. I wouldn't let this game run in the background just so I could look at it. 3 out of 5. The lighting is much the same as the art style. It's fine, it does its job, but it's far from memorable. The one time it shines is when it actually doesn't, and in fact gets darker during the end of a sunset and the sky turns red. It also shines when the lights come on in your city to subtly illuminate the dark paths. It's a nice touch that you can also customize the color of the light, given off by about half the structures in your city. Light also illuminates hidden ruins and settlements during the night, making them easier to spot. That doesn't make up for how little of a difference it makes in the game visually. 3 out of 5. Airborne Kingdom is lacking in grand cutscenes and moments to get your blood pumping, but there's plenty to keep you satisfied throughout a playthrough. I loved finding all the blueprint pieces for the wonders and learning what each wonder actually does. The first time I managed to ally myself with a kingdom felt like an accomplishment, and with each subsequent kingdom I was more excited to see myself getting to the end of the game. The ending is also a really pleasant surprise given the lack of cutscenes and narration up until that point. With all that being said, the game has an average amount of feel-good moments, with nothing particularly grand or overwhelming, but enough to keep you going. 3 out of 5. Frustrating moments were kept to a minimum, really being limited to my issues with the glitches and the occasional backtracking due to forgetting about a mission while having a different mission highlighted or active. Overall, Airborne Kingdom is a calming game with little to anger anyone, deserving a 4 out of 5. pacing of the game only falters near the beginning, as once you figure out how to ally yourself with one kingdom, you pretty much have the blueprint for the other 11. It's a minor flaw though, seeing as the pace remains constant throughout the rest of the game. The story, on the other hand, left me with mixed feelings. It's a solid story, especially for a game where you don't really have any characters, but because of that, it's hard to relate to anyone. Your only interactions are with other kingdoms or settlers whom you never actually see, as the entire story is told through text boxes. The fact that everything is told through text boxes, with the UI scaling a bit off and difficult to read, makes you less invested in the story, as you'll find yourself just clicking through the text to progress. For a city builder, it'll do, but it lacks plot elements to truly be noteworthy. 3 out of 5. The characters are completely forgettable and nameless. The only saving grace is the sheer amount of characters mentioned and written about. Of course, you never get to meet a single one of them or truly learn anything about their motives. Nonetheless, there's as many characters as you'd expect in the real world. Each interaction with the sovereign of one of the kingdoms produces a slightly different request, showing that even the rulers have different personalities. Most other city builders follow the SimCity school of design, and at least your advisors for different aspects of city planning add some character to the experience, but not in Airborne Kingdom. All this leads to a subpar 2 out of 5 for the character design. The environments are wholly linked to the level design, and as such, I only have one thing to add here. They do enough to be unique from one another, but 3 distinct environments is barely enough to give this metric a 3 out of 5. The music, similar to that of my most recent review of Where Cards Fall, feels more like elevator music than a dynamic soundtrack that adds to the game. Luckily for Airborne Kingdom, that's all it really needs, as there aren't any grandiose moments requiring anything but a soothing background soundtrack. Unlike many games that veer into traditional Middle Eastern sounds with their music, Airborne Kingdom doesn't feel disingenuous or like it's trying too hard. The soundscape complements the arid patchwork world well, while not being stereotypical or overwhelming. It could be viewed as a somewhat safe choice, as it is, but for better or for worse, it works. The worst aspect of the music is how little it varies. I can only recall one distinct track playing the whole time, in fact. But it doesn't drill itself into your skull, getting stuck in your head long after you turn off your switch. It's just a soothing background noise for a calm playthrough of a relaxing game. 3 out of 5. Perhaps it has more to do with the type of game Airborne Kingdom is, rather than actual effort on the part of the game band, but there's nothing to complain about when it comes to the logic of the world. The physics make sense, and there are no plot holes whatsoever. I mentioned the citizens models being subpar, but it's consistent with the visual style of the world, and I can't fault that in this metric. The game even goes so far as to explain why your kingdom can fly and why you're on a mission to ally yourself with other kingdoms right from the get-go. It's consistent and at no point left me questioning anything that I was doing. I only mentioned that this might be due to the sheer nature of the game, as city building is a universal aspect of humanity on a core level. Every real civilization that has ever existed has grown thanks to individuals coming together for the betterment of their society through the procurement of necessities such as food and shelter. Every city builder at its core resonates with these needs we can all relate to. I'm not getting any more philosophical than that though, and we'll leave this with a perfect 5 out of 5. It has been a while since I've reviewed a game with such great replay value. Although my first playthrough was a little bit longer due to the fact that I'm reviewing the game, I think it's safe to say a first playthrough lasts around 12 to 15 hours. That's not bad for a $25 game, but is made even better thanks to randomization. There is a New Game Plus mode available upon completion of your first playthrough, which randomizes where everything is on the map and makes the map significantly larger. Customization options also increase once you collect all blueprints for the 3 wonders, which means that although completing one playthrough isn't required to unlock these customization options, they sort of act as a New Game Plus bonus anyways. I'm sure for fans of city builders, this will at least triple the original length of hours I put into the game. There is also a creative mode, similar to what Subnautica offers, which I imagine will have some fans as well. For an indie game, this hits all the right spots for me, 5 out of 5. The post-game, as with seemingly many of the other metrics in this review, is closely linked to another metric, that being replayability. I've already mentioned everything the post-game has to offer, so I'll mention one thing it doesn't that I wish it did. More structures and customization. If it went just a little further to add new buildings or even extra kingdoms for your next playthrough or something new, this would have been on the level of Stardew Valley's postgame. As it stands, it still deserves a solid 4 out of 5. The collectibles are slightly disappointing only because I consider the wonders as such. There should be more than 3 wonders in any city builder, and they should all have different requirements to unlock. The other collectibles would be the customization patterns for buildings, which, although plenty to find, are visually underwhelming. I found myself gravitating towards the maroon-colored dusk or sunset skin mixed with the blue metal color for all of the structures in my city. I tried different skins, but they just did not appeal to me. Some of the options are also just there to make it seem like there's more customization options than there really are. On most of the buildings, you can't even see the changes in color of the flooring no matter how far you zoom in, and only a select few buildings have a lighting option that can be customized. Outside of this, there were no other collectibles like unique statues or something you can display in your city, perhaps a one-of-a-kind rotor for your propellers. It felt to me like a missed opportunity in so many ways that I cannot give the collectibles more than a 3 out of 5. The challenges and minigames also felt like missed opportunities, with there being none to talk about. A game with such a unique premise could have included time challenges seeing as your city moves. There could have been something like a challenge to collect a certain amount of resources in a given period of time that would have rewarded a unique collectible to display in your city. There's so many possibilities that weren't explored at all, and although I can't fault the game for things I thought it could have included, I sure can fault it for including nothing in the way of challenges. 0 out of 5. The same goes for any other extra feature. It has a pretty great world map, but that should be standard in all city builders, and especially ones that have fetch quests. 0 out of 5. Despite ending the review on a sour note, I really enjoyed my time with Airborne Kingdom. It's a relaxing city builder built around fetch quests and resource management. It's crazy to think no one had thought of creating a game around a floating city before, but here we are. For all of its mediocrity, there's shining examples of ingenuity in designs and features, making it every bit deserving of a 63 out of 100. Thank you for once again listening to me ramble about another game. If you've enjoyed your time with Aureko Gaming, please hit those like and subscribe buttons. I would love to get these reviews out to as many people as possible, especially those considering buying one of the games I review. Thanks again, and I'll catch you all next time.